Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 10 of the Titanforge podcast. I'm Dratnos, joined once again, returning to the show, is Tettles.
Yes, welcome back. It feels good.
Welcome back.
It feels good to be back here. I missed, unfortunately, the last show as I was trapped in Germany, forced to cast for many hours on end. So hope you guys enjoyed that for all of you tuned into the Method broadcast.
And filling out our triangle here is Trell.
Yeah, I'm in a new place now. I've successfully gotten home from Alaska, and I moved into my apartment. So,
fantastic! Welcome to your new home. And Tettles, you're also in a new home.
Yeah, for some reason, Trell and I are ending up traveling a lot lately. Of course, next week I'm going to be gone to Columbus casting the MDI, so we're really moving around a lot.
Yeah, so speaking of the MDI, that is both our main topic today and is going to be something that affects our programming for the next 6 weeks while it's ongoing. So for the next 6 weeks, we're not going to be able to do live shows because every weekend, Tettles, you're going to be casting the MDI over at twitch.tv/Warcraft, which we encourage everybody to watch. And those weekends for Trell are going to alternate between weekends where he's playing in the MDI, hopefully, and weekends where he's trying to qualify for the next week's cup. So hopefully again. So we'll not be able to be actually live probably for very many of those weekends, if any. We will try to. We will still release weekly episodes. We may miss a week or two, but we'll pre-record as many as we can, and we'll either stream them live on Twitch or you can just catch them straight to YouTube and straight to Spotify, iTunes, wherever you catch your podcast from. So that'll be how the next 6 weeks are affected. But first, let's actually talk about that MDI, and that MDI is going to be our entire show topic this week. Although I would like to briefly, before we get into that, just cover what you were up to for the past couple weeks, Tettles, which was casting the race for World First. How did that whole thing go, and how did you enjoy the event?
I mean, overall, I thought the event was pretty good. I ended up working some pretty weird hours a lot of the time, so you caught me doing NA primetime stuff at Australian primetime hours. So that was pretty interesting. But overall, I enjoyed the event personally. It was also kind of cool that we were there to see Method win. It would have been interesting if Method did end up in fact losing. It ended up losing. It would be interesting to see how the dynamic would end up shifting, but they won, so it's pretty exciting.
Yep, congratulations, of course, to Method for World First Ajara. This was a close race. Limit ended up being less than 12 hours behind, which is pretty good, pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, just the closer that they come every single tier, the better the race actually ends up being, right?
Yeah,
it's great to watch.
Mm-hmm. Especially now that both sides are streaming, and pretty much all the top guilds actually are streaming. There's not really any that keep a secret anymore. It's just made it such a better spectator sport, and I hope that this will lead to continued support for Race for World First and Blizzard, stepping up to make it even better.
I hope that some changes end up coming through, and I think just the fact that it's being validated just tier in and tier out with how much viewership it actually ends up getting is very good for it overall. So
yeah, I mean, this is it's 24/7 for 2 weeks, and just the channel never drops below 30,000 viewers or something. It's absurd. So
yeah, so the Method channel dropped below 10,000 viewers twice the whole entire event.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
And that was
yeah, that's awesome.
6 a.m. German time. It was just something obscene where it wouldn't have any.
Yeah, and if you added together all the channels that were participating in this race for World First, all the streams that were part of it, it's huge, it's massive. So
it actually beat out the Fortnite World Cup for weekly.
That's what I was about to say. I think it totally beat it out, and it's like a multi-million-dollar Fortnite tournament.
Yeah, so really just extremely exciting, and very, very happy you got to cast that, Tettles. That's awesome. So Trell, you on the other hand did not cast the race for World First, but you will be competing in the MDI. There's just a segue. Tell us why you're so amused by that.
I just love how you segue. You're like, well, Trell, you didn't cast the race to World First. However,
that's just it's something that you guys don't have in common that is interesting.
Don't bully Dratnos, Tettles. Come on, man.
I didn't say anything.
So Trell, you're playing in this MDI. That is our main topic this week. What is your team?
My team is a combination of the last two teams from the first MDI this year, Learn to Fly and the Gamer Dads. And we kind of combined because we each lost a few members due to different reasons. So it's myself, Edelweiss the healer, Dilemma, Dad, and Sestara DPS. And I'm the
You're the tank.
Mhm.
Big tank
Sometimes.
trail. Awesome. So
Mostly
that
the rogues kind of get threat for me, so I'm like half the time.
and one thing you were doing all of yesterday was streaming your time trials practice, which is something that basically nobody did last MDI was stream their time trials, but this time around we have teams actually streaming it. This
Yeah,
was yeah.
it's really nice that we're able to. I mean, the only reason why anyone's streaming is because Method both felt like they were okay to stream since they already know they're going to BlizzCon. Kind of trickled down that way, and every team's doing.
Yeah, Method NA, Method EU both chose to stream, and then every other team followed suit, which is really awesome, really good to see. But one thing that we've noticed from watching your stream is that the MDI is no longer double Outlaw Rogue meta as it was last time. They fixed the problem of double Outlaw Rogue. We now have triple Outlaw Rogue meta.
I really missed the double Outlaw meta. You know, that was degenerate. But then when it became 3 Outlaw Rogues, it really feels like the game's in a place where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, so I have a
And
tweet
balance
here.
wise.
I have a tweet here from Method EU's tank now. It is nerf outlaw, nerf outlaw, nerf outlaw, nerf outlaw. Then another that repeated another like 4 times.
Wait,
I retweeted that. Yep.
you don't use dark mode on your Twitter, Dratnos?
I've
Oh,
chosen.
let's talk about that.
I've switched to light
New
mode
topic.
for the viewer experience here. Okay, it is at a great personal sacrifice to myself. But
Dratnos, please.
okay, all right. We had the evidence. We go back to this overlay.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you have to show up
We can edit that out.
later on.
yeah. That's we're cutting the VOD. Cut the VOD. So what, Tettles? How do you feel about this the Outlaw Rogue situation that we've got going on here in this MDI?
So the triple outlaw thing is going to be definitely interesting to cast and watch how it ends up playing out. I know initially it looked like there might end up being some tomfoolery with Prot Warrior Brewmaster not Prot Warrior Brewmaster
Fury Warrior, right?
Prot Warrior Fury Warrior, yeah, Windwalker Monk, and then Outlaw Rogue. But then it's kind of quickly devolved into, oh wait, these dungeons are pretty simple. Whenever you run triple Outlaw Rogue, you can actually blow up every pack. So I kind of wonder if like 17 is like the wrong choice of like key difficulty, where you can actually just get away with just brute forcing the whole entire dungeon with just raw DPS, or if there's like a different reason that it's going to be like this.
Yeah.
People would still use the same comp, I think, if it was 19.
Right. The problem is like the higher the key level is, the more like utility and survivability become important, and Outlaw Rogue also has the best of those, as well as the best damage. So.
I mean, even yesterday alone, we tried Unholy DK and Fury Warrior and Arms Warrior in certain runs just to compare damage, and right off the bat, it just wasted time because they're just hard to survive. Like, you can't be directly in melee.
Yeah.
And, well, you don't have to be directly in melee, I should say, as Outlaw Rogues. You have long range, you have Cheat Death, you have Feint, you have all these tools, Cloak, Immunes, Vanish for threat. And then you play an Arms Warrior or a DK, and you're just screwed in all those situations. So.
There's all these abilities like Shadow Cleave and Waycrest, right, where you're just like, that extra range actually is massive for effectively doing damage and not taking huge damage at the same time. And just like, if your whole group is tanks, a healer with Barkskin Bear Form, and rogues with Cloak, like the amount of like big magic damage you can take across the group is way higher than if you had one person. And like, if you have an Arms Warrior in there, what are they supposed to do? I mean, they're supposed to get barked, I guess, and use big defensives, and their effective health is half of what everybody else's would be against that incoming damage.
It's very clear that this is also not just an MDI problem. This is like a game issue. It's not really fixable.
Yeah, so we could look at like it's not specific to MDI sized keys, right? If we just look at like top runs over here on Raider.io, okay, we got a triple rogue team on top. Okay, a lot of this is the same are the same teams, but like you can see there are actually a bunch of different triple rogue teams in here. The teams that aren't triple rogue are double rogue, and we've got like 3 single rogue runs. And almost all of these are Outlaw Rogues. There's like Saliathan in here who's playing Assassination, and like maybe one of these times Yoda played Assassination in one of these keys or something. But other than that, like the amount of rogues here on the front page, this is more than there was in Season 2.
It's just getting worse.
Yeah.
Do you think this is like unacceptable from like a game balance standpoint? Just the delta between like the amount of AoE that Outlaw does, and then like how much utility that they also have relative to other classes too. Does it seem like disproportionate? Because like they don't balance this game around AoE. I think that's a pretty safe assumption.
Yeah.
Is that they don't balance this game at all around AoE. So they just kind of like throw it to wind, and then they also don't balance this game very well around utility outside of just PvP. So
right, outside of like PvP and raid, like and like things like Shroud of Concealment, Gouge, between the eyes stun.
Not even in PvP.
Right, but those are effects that exactly aren't like Gouge, between the eyes stun, Shroud don't show up in raid, so that it's not something that like they really gets hit by the core of their balancing. And I think it's undeniable that like Rogue is extremely good compared to every other spec. So the question is whether or not a spec being overpowered in Mythic Plus is actually a problem for the game, like for the state of game balance.
Yes.
I don't think it's actually a problem for like competitiveness of the MDI. I think the MDI is extremely competitive, even with everybody playing the same comp. I think it's interesting. Like it's interesting to watch, and I think that the teams have huge ways to show their skill and diversify that way. But I think it's a huge problem for optics. Like I think it's a huge problem for when Twitch chat is always talking about how there's only a bunch of classes being played and only 3 classes being played and everybody else is left out. When there's 36 specs in the game and everybody has their favorite spec and they tune into Twitch to watch the esport and 3 of those 36 specs are represented and 33 aren't. Just the overwhelming majority of people who tune in aren't seeing themselves on the Twitch stream and never will on the MDI stream, and I think that's a big problem. So
people want to see their favorite class.
I don't think it makes the tournament less like interesting to watch or interesting to play in for like enfranchised people, but I think it makes the esport worse pretty dramatically. So I think it's a pretty big problem that they have.
And just doubling down on what you ended up saying is like at the end of the day, it's a speed run. So you're actually watching the teams compete to see who can do the dungeon the fastest. You're not looking to see like who can end up cheese the dungeon like the most weird way at the end of the day. So like you're going to end up seeing the best compositions brought by every single team, and that doesn't take away the validity from them. I think what Dad ended up saying in chat about I think it's only interesting to watch if you're already a high level player. I think that also does have some merit to it as well. Whereas like we can end up understanding pretty easily like what's going on, or we can like look at some of the pulls they're doing and understand just by pure size and just like difficulty of pull, and we can kind of hype it up in regards to that. But at the end of the day, from an optics standpoint, I think you're just like spot on, Dratnos.
Yeah, I think it would be dramatically better if they were to be like okay, MDI is something where you kind of expect all the teams to land on the same comp each MDI because they're just going to keep testing. Although it would be better if there were like a couple of disagreements about what the best thing to be doing was. But it would be really good if each patch it was a different answer. Like if it wasn't always Resto Druid Rogue. It hasn't always been Prot Warrior, but Resto Druids, Rogues have pretty much always been good. All of BFA and even back into Legion, a lot of specs of those. So
only Europeans played Rogue and Legion.
Yeah, Legion Rogue was not as big of a thing. That's certainly true. So that's less of a thing.
I think there's still possibility in this set of cups to where people might be able to play Brewmaster Fury Warrior double Rogue.
Yeah, you're looking at Brewmaster,
a different comp.
Brewmaster triple rogue, right? So you're potentially going to play a different tank than like Method is mostly going to play, right? And there are spots where Unholy Death Knight looks like it'll maybe be seeing some play. So we can actually let's take a look at what this first set of West Cup time trials is going to be, because this is interesting here. So these are to qualify for the first cup over here in the West, which you are going to be doing over the next couple days. We got Freehold, Quaking Grievous Fortified, Siege of Borealis, Raging Sanguine Tyrannical, and Waycrest Manor, Bolstering Teeming Tyrannical. So the Freehold definitely looks like a candidate here for Unholy. That's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I know several teams are trying it right now. And I forgot to mention also Mistweaver, Sierra one of the casters for this MDI said in chat, Unholy DK, Mistweaver might see some plays.
Yeah,
Mistweaver Way of the Crane actually pumps healing and damage at the same time on big pulls, so it is actually possible we see some Mistweaver.
I think Zimok might end up bringing out the Holy Paladin at some point too, right?
Right. Holy Paladin. The problem with Holy Paladin is your like the default composition is then lacking a battle res, so you kind of need the Unholy as well.
I mean, it's the same issue that Mistweaver has. It's like
right.
lacking the battle res.
Mm-hmm. But we did see Mistweaver last MDI as well in Waycrest Manor. There's if you can, particularly if you can find a spot where you can play unholy, or not unholy, but holy paladin, and not need that shadow meld that's what you're giving up, right? When you play holy paladin, you're giving up shadow meld and a B-res. You could maybe do something cool with it. I mean, they do a bunch of damage. They do some good single target, in particular. That it's like having a DPS
where you. Yeah, I'm sure you can get away with it in some dungeons, but I think in general it's probably just like straight up worse.
Yeah. Okay, so one other thing that we have in this MDI that we have never had before is Beguiling. Beguiling being the new affix. And there was a lot of concern because Beguiling is on this 3-week rotation about how it's going to work. Like, are we going to have to learn 3 different permutations for each dungeon, depending on which weeks it shows up in the MDI? And Blizzard actually, credit to them, came up with a fantastic answer to how Beguiling is going to work in the MDI. Each of the 9 dungeons of the MDI, Temple is still out because of the orb bug, has been mapped to a specific week or to a specific enchant or a specific emissary like variant. So one of the 3 weeks. So the Freehold and the Waycrest are both mostly full of voids, and the Siege is mostly full of Tide emissaries. And then the other dungeons, as we get to them, are each full of different types here. And so you only have to learn one like emissary spawning pattern for each dungeon in this MDI. What do you guys think of this change or this way to handle Beguiling in the MDI?
I think it's great. I think it's really nice that we can have one set of emissaries to think about every week and not have to change it every single time and reroute completely. We can just reroute based on affixes and key level.
Yeah.
It's also kind of nice that they didn't put the void emissaries in some of the worst dungeons, notably like if Temple comes back and is a void variant, you would actually be very upset.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the MDI, I think the Void Emissaries in a plus 17, no matter where they are never that bad. Like, there's that one kind of like scuffed place for them in Atal, but you can skip those.
No. Seth Rallis is actually just so bad.
It's the one, you're talking about the one in Galvazit's room, right? At the top of the stairs, right?
Not even the one at the very beginning of the dungeon.
Oh yeah, okay.
Beginning of the dungeon that wall you into pulling that pack is like what?
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, people pull those packs in MDI pulls all the time, don't they?
I did that dungeon on teaming this week, dude. That pull was like unmanageable.
It is pretty rough. I did it this week too on live.
It's easy. You just run in there, you bubble taunt, and then your bubble falls off. Yeah, and you're okay. That's
Those are kind of minimalized in MDI
rough.
settings anyway, though, because everyone has Shadow Meld. So even if there's a bad Void Emissary, you're just going to skip it, no matter what.
Well, there are some like boss room Void Emissaries, right? That would be a problem. But besides those, yeah, you can just meld everything. And even there are even mobs in these like in places that would normally be weird to like. Okay, have you guys done Underot this week on live? There's the Tide Emissary, Defiler, Death Speaker pull before the third boss.
Oh yeah, I have done it.
It's easy, dude.
You
just have a rogue walk up, sap the emissary, you ring a piece of it away, and then you pull the pack. And it's not.
Oh,
okay.
What we did was
good solution.
We spammed root on the emissary of the tides. We pulled the pack, and then once the Death Speaker was far enough away, we blinded it out.
Okay, I like that as well.
If you can separate the Tide Emissary, you can just pull Tides with the boss too. Even on bolstering, it doesn't bolster it. It's just like a free.
Yeah, although it is a tyrannical week, Tide Emissaries hit hard and bosses hit hard. So if your tank is on the squishier side.
Not a Brewmaster Monk.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about these different compositions here. And I guess one thing that is happening this MDI that didn't happen before is that you're probably going to play Brewmaster, right? For almost all these dungeons, right, Trell?
I'm for sure going to play Brew on some. I think I might need to play a Pro Warrior for Freehold. I'm not decided yet. I think for Siege for sure because it's Raging, Sanguine, and the more knocks the better. It's all about controlling the spotter and Sanguine.
So what are the cool things that Brewmaster is bringing, and why can you play this MDI when you couldn't last time?
Well, the damage is closer to Pro Warrior than last time, 100%. It's not like a giant 100-yard difference between the two specs. It's definitely a little worse in damage than Pro Warrior, and I don't have Spell Reflect, and that's the major disadvantage. But it does allow us to do triple Rogue without any loss of the Mystic Touch debuff. And we could also do Fury Warrior in some cases if it's like a 5-target pull dungeon, if every pull caters to Fury Warrior damage, that would be really, really good.
Yeah, so Fury Warrior is definitely closer in damage this tier or this MDI than it to like Outlaw than it was last time. Reaping was really rough for them because they can't do damage to more than 5 targets at once, basically. But they still struggle. I mean, that's still a problem for them. The way that basically they have Whirlwind gives them Blade Flurry, but only for 5 targets for the next little bit.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
I don't know.
Bro?
Why am I blurry?
I'm not sure.
So both of you guys have been blurry for me the whole entire time. So I don't. Hold on. We can actually change the region.
Yeah, all right. Let's mess with the Discord call. Oh, okay.
Is that better? Oh,
That looks
fixed.
Yeah.
I did it.
Incredible.
Good job.
Good work.
Actually, I can't stop looking this pale, but I did fix the rest of it.
Yeah, turn off the light. Turn off the light.
The lighting's too good. Hold up.
Okay. All right.
Dude, did you get a 10?
Oh.
Oh.
Well done. Well done. I think there's some color balancing that might need to be done there. Anyways, people just listening to the audio feeds are just, what are they on about? What are they talking about? Let's talk. Let's move a little bit into discussion of, I guess, Tettles. You weren't here last week when Trell and I briefly discussed this, but the engineering res is not an MDI. It's not present in MDI. Do you have an opinion on this?
I mean, okay, so engineering battle res. I don't even know how to feel about it. There is definitely a fix for that. I think it probably should be available on the tournament realm, but at the same time, I feel like in the same vein, I feel like it's like a game issue, not really like an MDI issue. Again, is like one of those things. The same as like the triple rogue thing. Like, well, why does Holy Paladin and Mistweaver and all these other healers not actually have a battle res, but like DK and Warlock does? Like, there seems like it's just like a little bit of a disconnect there, just from like a PvE standpoint. I kind of get it for like if you're only raiding, it's fine. It kind of makes sense. But if you're doing any content outside of raid, I don't really understand why DK and Warlock actually do have battle res whenever the rest of the healers actually don't. Especially since they moved mass res to like a healer only thing whenever coming into Legion. So like a Warlords of Draenor to Legion change is that only healers got mass res. So why don't healers also have battle res?
Yeah, I think
I agree.
that's pretty much what Trell and I landed on last week was the same perspective on it. So we kind of agreed that like we agree that there should be engineering res in the MDI would be an upgrade from the current state of the game, but the best thing to do would be to just rebalance everything and have a think about which classes should get which abilities, and have a think about whether or not Shadow Meld, Battle Res, Entangling Roots, Soothe should all be on the same one healer spec instead of spread out between the 6 healer specs.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess some people are saying that it's like just an RPG element. I do understand that, but so from like a gameplay standpoint, they end up giving you engineering battle res to kind of overlook this RPG element that would otherwise end up hindering as opposed to helping. But then it's significantly worse. So I don't really understand. In general, I think they should be added to the tournament realm. I don't think it would actually end up changing the meta at all. I don't think it'd make Mistweaver Monk or Holy Paladin any more or less viable, but it would be nice to have, I think.
Yeah, and they've proven that they were willing to compromise on the like flavor of these battle reses in the past, like when they made it so you could cast Soulstone on somebody who was already dead, right? That didn't used to work that way. You used to have the Soulstone on them before they died. But they sacrificed a little bit of the flavor there to make the BRes better, the BR situation better. They just need to continue forward on that.
One change that they actually made in Legion in terms of the battle res system is making it group battle res as opposed to individual battle res was actually a really good change. Especially since everybody was running with Blood DK Tank, Warlock, and Moonkin with the potential Resto Druid. So that was a very good change, but now it's like, since you don't run with the Blood DK Tank ever, and Warlock is pretty not meta, same with Moonkin, you only have Resto Druid as the battle res in your comp, so it's kind of rough for some of the Mythic Plus stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, another point of contention about this MDI, item availability to go with engineering items. Mechagon gear, not available in this MDI. Which is a pretty sizable nerf to a couple of specs that really like Mechagon gear. Kind of chief among them, I think, is maybe Fire Mage. Fire Mage with those cloth bracers is really, really happy.
It's just Fire Mage, right? That is good.
I believe that there are other specs that like Mechagon items too, but I think Fire Mage is among the biggest. I don't know. People in chat may know other specs that are kept down by these items
All I
not being
know is
there.
Fire Mage too.
Mhm.
I think they should definitely be in the tournament realm though. They are current content items, and everything's scaled to a certain eye level. And I think
What do you
the
think about
devs'
Punch
responses. I think Punch Card should be in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cyclotronic or the Dodge card would be awesome to play around.
The Cyclotronic, the thing about the MDI, right, is that everything is scaled to 455 or 445, which is mythic level gear. And normally on live servers, Mechagon drops 415, right? So 30 item levels below that. So there's not really a good way to get if they have to keep the scaling up to 445, they have to choose between two different things that aren't the way that live looks, right? They either have to give everybody scaled up, like better Mechagon gear than we have on live, or they have to give us no Mechagon gear and not even access to the 415s.
And then this, I think just in general, the only issue I would even have is just the Cyclotronic Punch card with how it ends up scaling, because if you ended up scaling it to 445, it'd do what, like 40 or 50% more damage than it currently does?
Yeah, trinkets scale big time with item levels, so that's
probably why they didn't put it in, but they could have adjusted it. You know, if they had more time, maybe for setting up the MDI realm, they could have adjusted this.
Yeah,
I think in general, though, I think I would have preferred to see Mechagon items, especially those cloth bracers for Fire Mage, because it more or less sets their viability in a spot that they actually can be brought because they are so good. So hindering them in any way, similar to how I feel about the engineering items, hindering them in any single way that's like that is not exactly ideal.
Yeah, if I were Blizzard and I were looking at these, like anytime a little problem like this came up, I would ask myself, what is going to help comps that are not triple rogue? And then I would take whatever action helped those comps. So like putting in these cloth bracers and having them be strong seems like a good thing to do for that.
Yeah.
Putting in Cyclotronic Blast at 445 and having everybody run that, that doesn't help that. So
I mean,
that would be stupid probably. Let's leave that.
5-man Cyclotronic Blast down any Void Emissary just ever. It seems pretty bad.
Yeah, so
it seems like
we don't need that.
It would be pretty memey. It would just like devolve into just.
You don't target Void Emissaries. That's a DPS list. You target the highest health mob in the pool. Excuse me, Tuttles.
Okay. Yeah, well.
Yeah, don't be ridiculous. The Void Emissaries, we're not pulling any of those.
Target Matron Brindle. Instantly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That would be good though, and like skipping certain phases on bosses, like the first boss in Wakecrest, the witches. If you skip the mind control, that's huge. If everyone had Cyclotronic, I'm sure you could do that.
Last
Yeah, or you could just all Cyclotronic Blast whoever gets mind controlled and probably kill them before they they get broken out of the mind control.
Wait. Does Cyclotronic scale with healer damage on the last boss in Shrine?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be huge too. So what healers can do there instead is at least take their Crucible Flame and then do mega damage during their buff.
Mm-hmm.
But if they had Cyclotronic, that boss would be dead.
True.
Yeah, especially a buffed up Cyclotronic, just insta kill the boss.
So yeah, I don't think we need to have that in the MDI, but I do think like whatever. Okay, and the rings as well. You know, the if then ring combos. Some of those help some of the other specs as well. So
I would like to see those too. Yeah, that's a good point.
So getting those in the bracers in, I think, would be worthwhile. All right, let's move on a little bit to talking about the structure of the MDI. One thing that we had last Cup is we alternate weeks between the East Cup and the West Cup, with a cycle that while the West is having their Cup, the East are having their time trials, and then that flips for the next weekend, and it kind of goes back and forth that way for 6 weeks with 3 Cups per region. The West we have EU and North America. And then the East, we have Asia Pacific and Chinese servers all lumped together playing those. Now, what we had last time is when we actually got to the 2 regions playing against each other, the West dominated pretty dramatically against the East in the heads-up matchups. Do you guys think that there should be any changes made to the structure of the MDI with the East Cup and West Cup? Or do you like it as was last Cup?
I think it'd be nice to split up the regions a little more. I think West is weighted a little more than East. NA and EU have certainly a lot of good teams, mostly EU, if I'm being honest. Not from NA, that's not biased. But East also has good teams, but not the quantity. So it's always a little bit skewed when it comes time for the tournaments where they meet.
Yeah, the 8th best West Cup team, there's a lot more like that team is generally a lot more competitive than the 8th best East Cup team, even if the best couple teams are all in the same high tier across the regions.
Yeah, because there's generally about 12 West Cup teams that could probably fill out that 6th, 7th, and 8th place slot realistically and perform similarly. I think in my mind,
there were last cup, yeah. Although there's every new cup last season there were fewer teams, and we might see a similar effect this time where the kind of it shrinks down, and even going into the start of the split, since it's the middle of the MDI's overall season, we kind of I think we'll see fewer and fewer teams competing for those spots. We saw it in the East Cups last season, where there was one cup where even only 7 teams actually completed the qualifying 3 dungeons. So any 8th team could have done it if they just finished the 3 dungeons that were qualifying ones.
At that point, it's a huge problem.
Yeah,
that was a major issue. Okay, so yeah, East Cup was just the Australian region just like did not send a team. We had, I think it was 2 Australian teams throughout the whole entire all 3 weeks. And of course, like if you guys know the history of the MDI, basically Free Marcy and Honestly historically are very, very solid teams. Free Marcy, of course, has actually won 2 MDI championships. So they're not a joke team. So the fact that they only did time trials the first week, had an abysmal time trial run, and then like flaked out of the MDI, and then we saw nothing else from any of the Australian teams, was like, what the hell is happening? I know Spider Bears and Matt are supposed to be playing. I hope their team ends up being pretty good. I am concerned with the depth of player base for East Cup region. I do hope it significantly improves.
Yeah, I think that it's good to incentivize more teams to show up from the East by having those slots available and like providing the same amount of support that they're providing to the West Cup, where there's already that amount of competition that they're looking for. But definitely, as it is right now, it's you can really see the difference in quality of those lower tier teams across the 2 regions.
Yeah, alternatively, though, it kind of concerns me because like if stuff like this continues to happen, then they might end up just separating it out like AWC, the Arena World Championship, already does, where they just don't even deal with Chinese or Australian region. They just leave them off.
Oh.
Yeah, so splitting it, I mean, what you can do is you could split it even further, and you could make the main televised on Twitch stuff, like instead of East versus West, you could have just NA Cups and EU Cups. And then when you get to BlizzCon, eventually you also have competitors from China and APAC shipped in. Who
I also don't think there are enough NA teams quality-wise to make... I think there are enough European teams quality-wise to fill out top 8 slots. My major concern would be filling out 8 NA teams. That would be just like worthwhile watching.
Yeah, and all of this, like part of the problem for both why we like you would have more teams if if balance was better and more people who play WoW competitively could play their main spec competitively in an MDI. I think there'd be more people wanting to do it. Right now, if you don't main Outlaw Rogue, Prot Warrior, Resto Druid, or like one of those specs that's really close to those ones, it's really hard to see how you could play in an MDI without picking up an entirely new class, right?
I think people are super hesitant to not be looking to play like the most bottom stuff in MDI and just doing it for fun. I think that the change where MDI is open sign up is actually super good. And I think one of the reasons that AWC is actually nice is that people are willing to play like whatever comp they want and like don't really care too much about the meta unless they're looking for top 4. They're just kind of there to play whatever comp they ended up having. I wish MDI was more of that and less like, oh, I have to play this like mega rigid comp, otherwise we're not even going to be able to do well.
Yeah, and part of that is just like structurally the MDI is kind of more hardcore. Like you have to complete these time trials with good times before you actually get on Twitch at all.
Never Dude actually makes a really good point too. It is an enormous time commitment, and if you don't have a real chance to win, then it's not worth your time monetarily. So you have to. Okay, so MDI is like to put the time in to win the MDI, that's like almost a full-time job, and it's probably not worth it.
I streamed for 11 hours yesterday after I got home from work.
Yeah, exactly. It's like literally like a second job's worth of time if you want to win.
Yeah, and Charles not even going to win the MDI, so it's like, you know, you have to do even more than that if you want to.
I have a job, no way I'm winning an MDI.
Exactly, but like, I feel like there are too few people who are in it for the fun too. I feel like there's just like basically you get like almost shamed out if you're not like pushing to be like the absolute best.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely hard to justify like competing just for funsies, right? especially with like five, when you have a team of 5 people and you have to like get them all together, practice, like play your maps, like that's
a good point too. It's a big time commitment, and like I referred to your MDI team as, what is it, a meme team? Like,
yeah.
Like, and that's like the disconnect that there actually is too. I do the same shit. Like I look at your team, I'm like, they're not actually playing. They're not going to play that much meme team, and I think that's how everybody ends up feeling. Is just like, if you're not actually pushing to win the MDI or to qualify for broadcast every single week, there's no point in even trying.
Yeah. So just to clarify, like I and 4 buddies, we signed up for MDI just so that we could have tournament realm access. We're not planning to compete or anything. We just are in there to be able to make tournament realm characters and get in practice runs with our buddies when they need a 5th or whatever.
But why wouldn't you just try to get on, or why wouldn't you even play at all? Like, why wouldn't you just try with your 5 buddies?
Because we'd have to have all of us be available at the same time, and then like that we'd have to choose to do something that is basically not going to reward anything over playing live or whatever, where we could get items and stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to get 5 people on the same page. It's like, we're probably not going to get in the cup, but we can spend 40 hours doing this week. You guys want to do that?
Yeah,
it's hard to do.
I kind of did that last MDI. Like we were somewhat competitive, but we were still, even on our best cup, we were still 5 minutes short of qualifying. And like we put in, we put in like half as much time or less than half as much time as the top teams, but we still put in way more time than what we got out of it, which is just the friends we made along the way type stuff. And obviously that was tremendously valuable, but it's hard to justify doing that over and over again for MDI. So I think that's kind of part of the thing, that like if it were a bigger thing, if there were more prizes, if prizes went went down further, if there was more of a scene around it, those would be ways I think to really get people involved in it more, besides just the top couple teams.
I actually don't think increasing the prize pool actually ends up affecting anything. Unfortunately, like I think, like, unless you could actually just like become a pro player off of, like, you'd have to be able to become a pro player off of not winning any prize money for it to actually be worth like time in regards to that. And you'd have to have people like working literal full-time jobs to be able to do that. But there's no chance that happens in a game like World of Warcraft.
Yeah, but like if it was just like, okay, we could do this MDI thing this weekend, and like if we qualify for a cup, we'll get some amount of money that makes it worth our time.
I mean, prize pool for BlizzCon is apparently probably going to be pretty big,
right?
Just
but
because of like how
qualifying for BlizzCon is is not realistic. But like getting your buddies together, it's not realistic for a lot of teams, right? Like there are.
Okay.
I mean, it's hard to make it to BlizzCon for sure. I don't know if you can pick up a brand new team and just be like, okay, we're getting to BlizzCon.
There's a slot for Method NA, there's a slot for Method EU, right? And then there's like these teams that are close to as good as those teams that are competing for those, the next couple slots at BlizzCon. And then there's, a bunch of extra spots in each cup full of teams that are not really realistic for that, right? So giving teams an incentive to get into those cups and, show up for a week and do something cool on screen, on stream, like giving out a couple $1,000 for that, I think would be an incentive that would get a lot of teams fighting for those 7th, 8th, and 6th slots in each cup.
They did extend the money prizes to even 7th and 8th places in the cup. So even if you make it into cups at all, you do get a little bit of cash.
Mm-hmm.
That's
even 8th place.
Something that also crosses my mind is maybe there's too many cups in terms of like, and just like how the point structure system ends up working out, to where you're going to have like less people really wanting to try hard because they know they can't try hard for all 3 weeks.
That's definitely part of it. Yeah.
The formatting is better. Don't let me get that wrong. The formatting is definitely better. It's healthier for the players in general too, and it's just like better in terms of like structure of the tournament. But at the same time, it does create less hype for like one-off events. It is a more long-term thing as opposed to like a hype one-off event.
Yeah, so instead of these like 3 or 2 seasons for each year, they could instead just do like 3 weekends each year where they're like huge tournaments.
I mean, do you remember MDI number 2? How it was just like every weekend for 4 weekends was a different region, and then you had like a 2-month break, and then there was the finals or whatever, right? It was like hype, but at the same time, it sucked to play. That much practice was actually just miserable. And then in addition to that, like, it was just so bad for player burnout. It was actually just miserable. So, but
Yeah.
this format is way
I think
better.
I think the format's good. Maybe just 4 cups instead of 6 cups.
Yeah,
So
I think that's a good
it's
call.
just like 6 is a lot in a row.
I
Every
think
weekend it's just the viewership's going to go down.
I think carrying the points forward from last season as well. I think that these 2 seasons should be completely separate. Like they should be airlocked from each other and not have points carry over.
Isn't it like? Don't you get like 100% more?
It's 50% more, I think, points this season.
50% more?
But I think I think that's just trying to create an effect that would be better created by just saying, hey, it's a fresh start and like a completely new team here. Because
but then there's no point for Trell's team to even try last season.
Well, I mean, there was they could have tried to win last season. They didn't.
Before the first season, nobody has points, so you might as well, right?
Yeah.
This time we're actually at a more disadvantage, but we still want
right because now there are teams that are both better, more established, and also have more points than if you're trying to come in and challenge. So it's a higher bar to clear. Like not only do you have to get more points than them in each cup, but you have to get a lot more points than them to actually overtake them.
I didn't mean that there's no point like at all, but like third cup, like what's the point of even trying to qualify for third cup if you haven't qualified yet from last season at least?
Yeah.
Other than getting like 20 or 40 points moving forward.
I agree that there would be, but now there's this problem where like, okay, what's the point of competing in this MDI if you don't have any points, and now you see that you have to actually overtake these teams that already have points accumulated quite a lot from the first cup.
Does the 50% not at least help that?
It does help, but it would help more if it was 10,000%, which is what you'd get if you deleted the points from last season, right?
Okay, so maybe it should have been more than 50%.
I just think, I think you just have the 2 separate seasons, and maybe you make a slot at BlizzCon for the team that like the best team that didn't qualify from either cup across both the seasons or something.
Because
to be fair, it's still kind of a new system anyway, and so teams are like forming quickly and disbanding quickly. And over time, I think it would get more stable.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. If there are consistent teams week in and week out, and if there was for some reason like sponsored teams where your team is not just going to disband after the season, or if there was like longevity in terms of like actual commitment to the team, not necessarily just like a one-off thing, then I think it's probably a better system. That is actually a very valid point.
Right. I think you're right. Like if this was like a League of Legends type thing where there's like an LCS and the same teams always play with each other and they have a name, and instead of like this time it's just like, okay, Trell's team this time is just a different team than it was last time, right? And it's people can play with whoever they want each time, and there's fluidity that I think makes it so that carrying over the points from last season is a drawback. Anyways, those are just some structural concerns we have with the MDI. All in all, most of these complaints are pretty minor that we've had. I think the big one is the triple rogue meta.
It's not even an MDI problem again.
Yeah, again, that's a problem that we see in the MDI, but is actually it exists in Mythic Plus just in all states of the game. But I think it is also the biggest problem that the MDI has. And I think that we will, if that, like I expect that the majority of Twitch chat comments on this MDI will be about the meta, and the rogue meta and everything. So
maybe some copy pasta about just tuned in to see the diversity in the MDI, and all I get is triple rogue or something ridiculous. We had CG tweeting about it the last MDI with double rogue. He was taken aback with how much comp diversity we saw too, and I just sit there and I look at those things and I'm like, he does realize we're like speed running dungeons, right?
Yeah,
he does realize that they're playing against the dungeon, they're not actually playing against the other team. There's no counter picking here.
Yeah, that is true, and there have been suggestions to add those elements to MDI, and I think that they're all bad and stupid and shouldn't be implemented.
Thank you.
Yeah,
preach, Dratnos.
Okay.
I'd like to see a ban. I think that'd be fun. But
people think that bans and stuff would be cool, like Trell, and they're really, really dumb because like if you could just ban somebody, yeah, if you could just ban a spec, like imagine all the practice you have to do for each of these dungeons, right? And you just have to like learn a route, and then it's like, okay, now we have to learn this route with all these different combinations of like which specs we have that can be banned, and like what we're gonna play if this is banned, and you just like branch the decision tree and the practicing that you have to do like 100 more times when you add something like that.
Counterpoint.
Yeah, no, I don't think bans are good this season.
I banned Resto Druid versus Team Dratnos. No. I'm banning Resto Druid versus Team Dratnos. Dratnos, what are you counter banning with?
I will ban Outlaw Rogue.
All right.
Oh, thank God you didn't ban Brewmaster. We're good.
No, can you imagine like, all right, Trell, I'm banning Brewmaster versus you. You fire back with a Prot Warrior ban versus my team. You're like, what the fuck are we playing, dude?
Yeah.
What the Fiesta some
Yeah.
Guardian gameplay that none of us have practiced.
Okay, one idea to force class diversity through some system similar to a ban that I saw, I think this was Nagura's idea, was if each dungeon map, in addition to having affixes associated with it, also had a banned class that was like that dungeon had associated with it one or two banned classes for the entire, like anytime it showed up in the MDI. So like Freehold is like Quaking, Grievous, Fortified, Beguiling, no Druid.
So let me actually try to explain why it works in a MOBA, but it doesn't work in something like the MDI. So basically, for role restricted classes like healer or tank, there are only so few specs that you can actually end up playing. There's like like 6 tanks or something. So banning anything with a pool that only has like 6 out of it is like pretty ridiculous. Whereas with a MOBA, you have like 130 characters, or like even if you were banning DPS specs, banning DPS specs.
Oh, that's not quite true. You got to think of like the role they're playing. So like a mid player probably has like 9 to 10 mid characters he would play if one got banned.
And there's probably only a couple of ones that are viable in any given patch cycle in an MDI or in a MOBA as well. Although there's that argument can also be made to shrink the pool in an MMO as well.
But like also those characters all bring such different things to the game, and they're not. I don't think it's as widely disbalanced as WoW classes are. Where if you get a Blood DK instead of a Brawl Warrior, they die like 3 times as fast in the same pack setting. Whereas a mid player, their favorite mid getting banned or something, and they swap to a different mid player in a MOBA, then it's probably just going to be roughly about the same damage, just a different type of utility and all that in the game they play.
Yeah, like literally imagine if you had 2 tanks or 2 healers banned in like one given set of the MDI, you'd be like, oh god, dude, this guy's never played Holy Paladin. What the fuck is he doing? Or imagine if the healer didn't even have like the fucking spec set up that he needed to play or something. Like obviously it wouldn't be like that. That would be ridiculous, but that would be really funny.
Yeah, I mean, everybody would have to be ready for, to play however deep the bans could make them go into the like specs.
3, which is a lot for how much practice.
Although, almost every tank or healer and DPS that does MDI is forced to play something that they don't like, that they wouldn't choose to do, like that's not their main on live, right? Like no matter what healer you play on live, you learn Resto Druid to play MDI, right? No matter what tank you play, you learn Prot Warrior.
If it's like 1v1 kind of thing, I can kind of get it, but it's a speed run where you're not really playing against the other team, you're playing against the dungeon, and then the other team is also playing against the same dungeon, then you just kind of compare results after the fact.
Right, but they're trying to make it an esport with this 1v1 thing, where like that's why you're doing it at the same time, right?
Not because you're actually against the other team. Yes.
Well, yeah, but they want it to be that way, right? Like they want it to be a competition in an esport and not just 2 teams speed running simultaneously. So adding some amount of interaction between Team A and Team B might be upside for the purposes of making it more esporty.
Maybe.
I don't know. I still think it would be miserable to have to practice dungeons with more comps. So I think that for that reason, bannings would be bad. But
yeah, it's true. I mean, I feel like if I had to play a Warrior because Brewmaster got banned, it wouldn't be that hard for me. It depends on the player, I guess.
Well, yeah, that's because you've got 2 specs like at MDI level basically already right now. Pretty close.
But if you ban a rogue, then you really do have to redo the entire dungeon differently. So.
I think you can only ban maps in a game like WoW with like something like in the MDI. I think you can only ban maps. I don't think, and like if you did map picks, then it'd be fine, I guess. But you can't really ban classes like that.
Just
banning maps is like ish okay.
Next expansion, what they need to do is they just need to make dungeons where 2 teams can do them at the same time. Like dungeons where there's 2 entrances to it, and like which packs you pull will affect what's happening for the other team in the same run.
Stop.
Yeah. No, check it out. It's like Portal 2. Yeah, exactly. Where like there's the 2 paths that like can't directly interact with each other, but like what you do on one side affects the other side a little bit. So like if you rush to one spot and pull a pack out of there, then the other team can't pull that pack, and maybe they wanted it for counts, so they have to adapt.
That'd be pretty cool.
Or like whoever pulls one boss first, then the other team that gets there is going to have to fight a different boss, and so there's like You know, that kind of thinking.
It's like a PvP island, and
Sort
the other team
of.
has to tag on the block.
I don't think you should be able to actually like PvP the other team, but like if you're just like running down, you know, two routes that where what you do does affect the other side a little bit, it could be kind of cool. Could be kind of cool.
And you get some items from the vendor at the beginning of the key, where when you kill a mob, you get 70.
Yeah, exactly. You could get Dungeoneer's doubloons.
Where are my Azerite nodes?
Yeah, Dungeoneer's doubloons, exactly. And someone in this cave is mining Azerite from the world's open wounds. Press stop to it.
Oh no. But anyways, yeah. So with banning maps in MDI number 2, we actually saw whenever you had losers pick, they also had losers pick a fix, and you had Dr. J picking explosive every dungeon because he knew that people didn't practice explosive nail slayer. Who the fuck plays that?
Yeah, those picking miserable affixes to try and win, but they're miserable is is definitely rough. Yeah. Okay. Let's open it up to questions from the audience. Doing some Q&A. One thing that we've decided to do going forward is have our Q&A be part of our interact with people who aren't watching live. So the way we're doing that is our Twitter account, Titanforge WoW. We are tweeting out what our topic is on Thursdays, and then our live show is on Saturdays. So anytime between Thursday, Friday, and early Saturday morning, you can find our Twitter, Titanforge WoW, and ask us questions about whatever our topic is. And we're that way, even if you're listening to this, using iTunes or Spotify, you too can join the conversation. So tell us, Trell, what questions do we have here today?
You want to fire off with the first one, Trell?
Go ahead. I'm looking for one.
All right. So we got the Thorough Tank, friend of Trell, apparently. So he says, thoughts on the restrictions of essences by role. Actually, hold on. This is the wrong one. I grabbed the wrong one. 1 second.
Oh, no.
Yes.
We were talking about this beforehand. Here we go. From the same guy. It says, how do you feel about the range versus melee interrupt dynamic? Is it a solution to having dungeons require less interrupts like Legion did, or to give the range the same cooldown interrupts as melee? What other potential solutions do you think are viable? So...
I think that ranged kick having the same interrupt or same cooldown as melee is the best solution. The best of, Okay, here's how I do it. Melee. The argument from Blizzard is that melee kick should be better because you have to get into melee, and that's fine. I think that it's okay if melee have better kicks, but I don't think it's okay if the way that's better is the fact that melee can actually kick every cast and ranged can't. So. The way I would do it is I think Demon Hunter Kick is a good example of a way to do this. If you successfully kick, you get some resources. Just give melee stuff like that. Warrior Kick heals them for 10% when they successfully kick. Rogue Kick gives them energy. What other melee specs even are there, dude? That's all the melee specs I know anyways. So
Enhance.
Enhance is Wind Shear, which already is a buffed kick in different ways. DK already has a buffed kick as well.
Range, that's the point.
There's definitely not a druid cast spec that is melee.
Give ranged kicks the same duration as melee kicks, give them the same cooldown, and just make melee kicks have some ancillary benefit. And that way, it'll be better. Melee still have a better interrupt, but ranged can actually still participate in the dungeon, and you don't just get these spots where you're just looking at a pull and you're like, well, we brought 2 mages to this dungeon, so we can't do this pull. And that's something that they should try and avoid. Yeah.
It's just mob design at the end of the day. If they went into this, okay, so basically their goal for BFA dungeons was to make sure that you couldn't just group up and kite the mobs the whole entire dungeon. So they answered that by making the mobs end up casting on the nearest target and have just a boatload of casts that needs kicking. Unfortunately enough, they made so many casts that you have to just have mandatory melee on very important kicks all the time. And basically whenever you end up pulling too big, you have to have all 4 melee kicks available at all times. So there's not really much you can do about that.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. So I don't think that that's a problem. I think that the problem is just that the balance that works for a melee comp doesn't work for a ranged comp because of the kick cooldown being so long.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a big driving force behind BFA meta where triple melee is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'd all agree on we'd like to see that change.
Yep.
1 range or 2 range.
So good question there.
Yeah, I think I just in general, I think one ranged meta is a little bit more fun, not only to watch from like an MDI perspective, but I think it's a little bit more fun to play as well. Makes your healer's job a little bit more easy too.
Yeah, I think that ranged are an interesting thing that should exist in keys more than they do right now, or more than there were some this season, but last season they were very endangered species.
I mean, the triple ranged meta was also very problematic for other
Right.
reasons.
Yeah. Well, that meta was just developed because range could outrange all the abilities, right? And they've certainly fixed that. Was something they could easily fix on the dungeon side.
Yep, they fixed that, I think. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next question from Sleepless at Sleepless Wow, also on Twitter. How do you fix that the change from reaping to emissaries has increased the chance for a dungeon to be dead 1 week due to their placement / affix combos? And so far, have the affix pairing changes been good, bad, indifferent? So tell us, what do you think about, like, you talked about this. You talked about void pathing in Temple being extremely toxic. Do you have a set of opinions on this?
I mean, I think void pathing can be pretty bad just depending on how the dungeons are ending up being structured. I think in general, having very cylindrical dungeons and tubular dungeons where you actually can't deviate your path a lot.
Tubular.
Tubular makes Void Emissary very problematic just in its current state because of how you're not really able to skip them beyond like death running, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it ends up making dungeons like really dead some weeks where you have to actually do the Temple of Seth Rallis teaming pack at the bottom of the stairs or death run it and just lose 45 seconds or whatever. So
several teaming packs are awful. Those Void Emissaries in Temple, especially without Shadow Meld on live, horde teams have to fight them, and it's just miserable.
Yeah, exactly. Without Shadow Meld, it's also I think that's also a big issue is that we all play Horde here because I don't know, all of NA is Horde. So
we like to play with our friends, and all our friends play Horde, so it's a chicken. It's which came first, chicken or the egg type situation. I've heard rumblings that next expansion there's a possibility that it'll you'll just be able to queue cross faction for stuff. Yeah, just group cross faction. So that would be kind of cool. Then we could just play Shadow Meld in our keys and still hang out with our friends.
And then you have like stuff like Moose just said, like a Taldazar. There's like a Void Emissary that's literally in the pack right before Volcall. Death Run.
Hardest pack in the dungeon, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's dude. My strategy. My strategy for that was we onk skipped in, and then to skip out, we just died and res back at the front of the dungeon. I ran down to the bottom of the stairs, opened the switch, and then we just all died and got back to the start of the dungeon. Like
I don't know how you do that dungeon without like a Shadow Meld. Like there's nothing really for you to even say. So
there's actually a very technical way that you can slip 4 people in there.
Yeah, there's also
combat, but.
So there's the way where it gets in.
Side,
well, there's the way where Void Emissaries only get in combat with one person, right?
Yeah. So if you have say one rogue player goes to the left side of Volcall's room with the pack, and then right after he gets combat with the Void Emissary, the other 4 players are shrouded with the second rogue and go on the right side. Those won't get in combat, but the one rogue does, and then he advances.
Okay, so you can also they put up an invisible wall there, but not exactly in the most great spot. So you can actually still just like walk all the way around left-hand side if you really want to, but that's obviously
there's
not time efficient.
There's like a rock jump swim combo that you can use to get into the room weirdly from the side.
Yeah, but even then, like having that as the thing you have to do to skip that emissary is actually insane for a pug to even think about doing or explain to the timing on the shroud and the one player going left and the other 4 going right, and then vanishing before the mob's body pull the boss, and it's like. No way, man.
All right, this question also had another part, which is asking about the affix schedule. So far we've seen Fortified Bolstering Grievous, Tyrannical Raging Explosive, Fortified Sanguine Grievous, Tyrannical Teeming Volcanic. How do you guys like this combo, these affix combos compared to the old affix schedule?
I don't feel one way or the other, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I'm undecided so far. I need to see the whole thing. Once 12 weeks have gone by.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with them so far. It was weird to me that we had 2 Fortified Grievous weeks, like back-to-back Fortified weeks were also Grievous weeks. That was strange. That's not the kind of thing that I think they did with the old calendar very much at all. So that was a little bit weird. But outside of that, like most of these weeks have been okay. Like none of the weeks are super dead, right? Like explosive and teaming both occurring alongside tyrannical instead of fortified was really good for making them not super annoying. Fortified bolstering Grievous was like a little big pain, but I think that the affix schedule looks pretty good, with the exception of Beguiling also being another affix that slows things down in a way that Reaping didn't.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is that it just like slows dungeons down in a way that Reaping otherwise did not. I think dungeons are a higher likelihood of being just like dead in the water week to week now than they otherwise would be. Because in Reaping weeks, you had probably like 1 to 2 dungeons that were just like straight, just like not doable. Like Grievous is too bad this week.
Yeah, I agree.
Bolstering is too bad this week. Sanguine is too bad this week. Whatever. Like some dungeons would just like straight up be dead in the water. Whereas now you have probably like half the dungeons just dead because of shit like Temple of Sethralis and Ataldazar just like being flat out just gone, right?
Yeah. All right. Any questions here?
Yeah, I got one. So GrowSpec98 in chat says, I have a real question. Do you think they should full commit to making this game more esports focused and make the changes necessary for that? Or is it more important to maintain the MMO RPG elements? What do you guys think?
I don't think that they have to choose between the two. Like, I think that there are small balancing tweaks that you can do to make it much more, like, almost all the infrastructure I think exists for it to be a good esport already, and they just need to, like, do some class balancing. So yeah, like so he's referencing like everybody having a BRES, but like I don't think that hurts the MMO aspect of the game very much at all. Like
I agree.
Making those sorts of tweaks. I think that the MMO side of the game is pretty unharmed by making those. Now I don't think that giving everybody a BRES really fixes the like. I think that I think that helps a little bit, but I think that is only part of the problem with the class balance right now in MDI. I think that like there's just fundamental healing, like fundamental numbers problems with how the different healers work in five person groups, fundamental numbers problems with how Outlaw scales with the number of targets compared to every other spec, and how Prot Warrior does tanks with other specs. Sorry for that. And so. I think that
they could just put like 5% more effort into the esports side of things, and it would just be way more balanced and easier to see more comps than usual. Just the little things over time would add up, like giving paladins the option to have shadow meld, or giving paladins
Shadow meld is a big one. Shadow meld is a huge thing that needs to be changed for MDI specifically, but it doesn't even need to be changed for live keys. Like live keys, we don't have shadow meld for.
That's what that question means to me, is like the MMORPG element is a class fantasy, so that's why Paladin can't be Night Elf because of the class fantasy. That's why they don't have BRES.
Paladins can be Night Elves. Like
ability.
we had Night Elf Paladins in Legion Class Hall. One of your followers was a Night Elf Paladin, so that was not like too big of a thing. Okay, let's. sorry, there's people outside. All right. Sarah here in chat has, it's all fixable by making dungeon-based nerfs, i.e. inside a dungeon, this ability does less. They do it with healer major abilities where they do more to compensate.
Okay, and so that's basically
the PvP solution.
PvP stuff, yeah. So there's like completely separate balancing. I don't really like the concept of complete separate balancing. I think this game goes a long way if they actually balance utility and AoE DPS within one another, and they actually care about the balancing between utility and AoE DPS for PvE just in general. I think that ends up solving a lot of issues that they end up having. Because like, right now Outlaw is just like straight up out of control. It actually does like 50% more damage than the second best AoE DPS, right? And it has literally just like insane amounts of utility. Same with Resto Druid. Same with Monk arguably has like stupid ass utility too. Like there's like some that's just like way better than others, and there's I don't know. Okay, 50% is a bit much. I will say that's a bit embellishing.
They're just overall so good. Like it's the utility and the damage. Like Unholy DKs will beat Outlaw on a big pull, but
Unholy DKs don't have Cloak and Shroud and Gouge. So yeah. I think the PvP solution though should be a last resort. Like, if we need that to make, I just think that it's jarring when your ability works differently in different parts of the game. And
I think it's very challenging to make feel okay.
I think that they really need to be careful before they start doing that. But on the other hand, like if they just hit Resto Druid healing by 10% in dungeons or whatever, and like the abilities all do the same thing, they just do less numbers in dungeons. That might be an okay band-aid to those sorts of problems. And like,
okay, as long as it's like aura changes on abilities, I actually still
even then,
that.
like, I would be much happier if they could just come up with a solution, right?
Yeah, because if you want to hit an aura for like an AoE ability, oh yes, I'm going to sunder on single target in Mythic Plus, but in Raid I'm going to sunder only on 3 targets. So then it's like, I'm just using that as an example. I don't know why I just picked.
Yeah, so anything that like changes the rotation, like, so one thing they could do for Outlaw would be like they could nerf Blade Flurry's damage coefficient, or they could nerf Blade Flurry's uptime. Now, I think they could just safely do that and also have it affect Raid, but if they only wanted to do it in M+, that is something that would then change how your class works in Raid and M+, and I think that that's something they should try and avoid doing.
I think this would upset a lot of rogue players, but they might cap Blade Flurry targets eventually.
Yeah, I mean, if it's okay to have Fury Warrior only be able to hit 5 targets, why is Outlaw Rogue able to hit more?
Yeah.
I think that's, that's reasonable. I think that definitely those two classes should behave the same way.
Having uniform design principles whenever you're making specs, or having them be so different that every spec is unique, is the only way of actually doing it. If you want to have every spec actually feel unique, I'm fine with it, but you actually have to double down and actually just follow through with it. You can't just like do this half and half shit that we have right now, where some specs are just like straight up better versions of other ones, where there's absolutely no reason that you're ever going to bring a Feral Druid ever because Outlaw Rogue exists.
Yeah, that's I think we're all kind of on the same page on this. Okay.
Yeah, balancing I think is very unachievable in this game, though, to be fair. I think it's just a pendulum that swings one way or the other, and it'll hit some stuff, and unfortunately at some points you hit the triple Outlaw Rogue meta.
All right, other questions that we've got here from the chat?
We had one from Zulur earlier. It says, if not bans, how would you personally change the meta comps? And I think, okay, so for me, if you really want to just like completely uproot the meta, then I think you actually just like, so Resto Druid has to get Mastery nerfed in like some substantial way, and then in addition to that, Wild Growth probably should hit 10 targets instead of 5. That makes Resto Druid still healable in Raid. That also makes them just like playable overall. So that's a way that you could actually change it to make Resto Druid substantially worse. You also make them do less damage, and they're just never brought again. You never see a Resto Druid ever again.
I mean, I think they would still be brought, like, even if they did less. Like, they're just so good right now for so many different reasons.
You could just drop the hammer on Resto Druid.
Yeah, I think it would be okay if they over nerfed Resto Druid at this point, because it's been so good for so long. And like their healing, their mana efficiency, their damage, and their utility are all top notch. So like it's okay. You can target multiple of those, and I'd be fine with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Vortex in chat says, "Don't nerf Resto Druid healing, just nerf their utility." That's absolutely the incorrect way of approaching it. They stupidly made a bunch of the dungeons this expansion heal in a way that is conducive to Resto Druids, but is like completely like absurd if you want to play any other healer. And it doesn't make any sense like why they designed dungeons like this, but they did.
Well, so I mean, Resto Druid is just so good at 5 target healing, right? Like they have a bunch of hots, and their challenge is like, okay, I have to heal all the people in my party, and the more hots I put on one person, the more healing they get exponentially or whatever. And in a raid, it's a real problem where you're handing out 20 hots and you have to figure out who gets those 20 hots. But in a 5-person group, each of the people in your group just gets a bunch of hots and they get a huge amount of healing from that. So and any intensive healing in a 5-person environment is just going to be good for Resto Druid the way their mastery is designed right now. So you just, like Resto Druids can just put out higher HPS numbers than every other spec at a lower rate of mana per second as well. So I think that just needs a nerf, yeah. And then on top of that, they also have the best utility in a lot of ways too.
Something could happen, and everyone would love to see a meta change. Like Resto Druids have been good for 2 years in Mythic Plus. It's time for something else,
Yeah,
tanks rotate a lot.
So somebody says, why not buff other classes? I don't even feel like I don't even feel like the other healing specs are actually that bad. I think Breast is just like completely out of line in my mind.
Yeah, if you buff other classes, you have to find a way to buff them that doesn't make them absurd in raid. Because like, if you just like, okay, you would need to buff most of the other specs healing by something like 20% probably to bring them up to Resto Druid M+ healing, and that would make the raid situation absurd. So those are like that would, I think, that I don't think that's the solution. I think that Resto is just a huge outlier in terms of what they can do in a 5-person group. Again, just given the design, it's the opposite of the Disc Priest problem, where Disc Priest has one really good hot atonement, and when they are 5 people, they just run out of things they can do after they apply their 5 atonements. Whereas in raid, they can just keep applying it all the way up to 20 people. So it's the exact opposite problem that Resto Druid has. And besides those 2 specs, with those fundamental design problems, where like Disc Priest loves a huge number of people and Resto Druid loves a small number of people, all the other healing specs I think just work fine with pretty much any number of targets.
I mean, okay, so WoW is okay. So MDI specifically and WoW in general is getting more like meta hindered, where you actually have to play like the most bottom shit, otherwise you're not going to get brought. In expansions previous and like stuff like that, you could actually just kind of get away with playing whatever you want. Player knowledge ended up meaning more, and like spec to spec knowledge ended up meaning more. But now they've kind of changed, and like I think Discord is part of it. I think just like the spotlight being on everything else is also part of it.
Knowledge, like the availability of knowledge, like if you it used to be that if you were the best Unholy in the world and Unholy wasn't a good spec, like you would still be better than if you switched to Outlaw, because it would take a long time to learn all this stuff about Outlaw. But nowadays, like, all of the information is pretty readily available to switch to any given spec, and you're also like, if you're doing something uniquely cool with one spec, everybody else will be able to figure it out pretty quickly after you start doing it, and it starts being logged or showing up in places.
Yeah, I mean, like, Trell and myself both write guides. I wrote the class guide for Balanced Druid. Trell writes the Brewmaster Monk Mythic Plus guide. Like, before, like, Trell and myself would be some of the most informed people for these specs, but now it feels like just the availability of information is just out there in terms of like streams too. Like you can just watch, like MDI is being streamed. Like you can watch your favorite player do the MDI and you can actually learn a lot. Their comms being open is actually a very nice thing too. So you can actually understand the nuances of the issues of the situations that they're having as well.
Yeah, you can emulate a team strat really easily with streaming. I think, which makes it more fun, in my opinion.
Undead
stressful.
In chat has I think a good point that applies not just to Outlaw Rogue, but okay, so he says that's an inherent issue with Outlaw currently too. It's insanely easy to pick up. I think that's just true of most classes with class balance or class design the way it is right now. In previous expansions, in like particularly not Legion, but before then, like Mist's era, specs would be pretty complicated, and there'd be a lot of nuance to picking them up. And
were they actually complicated rotationally? I didn't play before then. I don't
somewhat, more so than today, and like there were more tricks and like annoying things that you had to learn. And I think the game is better for not having them, but it does mean that there's a lower barrier to picking up a new spec than there used to be. And that
I think the choice to be dumb is also not an option in today's standards too.
Right, and it's harder to just. Yeah. I mean, everybody just wants to play the best thing, especially in like MDI setting. So,
I think LFG was also a big reason that ended up happening as well, because people are getting just like bullied because they play something that's like less desirable.
Yeah, we've talked about this problem in the past, where like it's just hard to get in a group if you're not one of these top couple specs. It's hard to get if people just start when they start a group, they're looking for a tank, right? They're just gonna click yes on the Prot Warrior and no on the Demon Hunter, and that's that's the
way it goes, man.
I should have mentioned earlier in the comp talk, but I tuned in to Now stream and he was testing Brewmaster in one of the time trial runs, and instantly
was
in his
Now
chat,
playing it?
Yeah,
or was
Brewmaster, and Now was too in Siege, and his entire chat was like, "Is Brewmaster meta? Is Brewmaster meta? Is Brewmaster better than Prot Warrior?" There's like 1,000 players now in the LFG and live WoW only accepting Brewmasters because of that.
No, they're not only accepting Brewmasters, but that's true. Is everybody? No, people aren't really. We're not really conditioned to be like in a okay, everything works meta. Everybody's just ready for something new to be the best thing and only accept that spec, right? Like the solution to the Prot Warrior meta isn't going to be an open meta. It's going to be a Brewmaster meta or whatever to in people's minds. There's always like a best spec. And I think part of the problem is that historically in Mythic Plus, there have like specs have been that much better than other specs, and a solution.
Dude, okay, like class balance. I'm actually like almost pretty confident that every single DPS spec is actually very close to one another on patchwork single target, and then in addition to that, every healer spec is close to one another on raw healing throughput.
Mm-hmm.
Tanks are a bit weird. Their mitigation's probably there's some tanks mitigation's pretty shit.
There's what the Feck Mallory index. You guys heard of that? That's one of the ways they sim tankiness.
Tanks will leave them out, but DPS and healing is actually very close under these very, very constrained, like just indexes that you end up looking at them through, and then it's like this like very narrow lens that you actually don't get a good gauge of it, but they're being balanced around these things, and it's like, oh wait, this class is actually just absolutely astonishingly broken in this aspect, and we didn't know.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's okay if a class has a niche and is like, when a certain situation comes up, that class really shines. I think the problem is that like in Mythic Plus, that's the same in pretty much all 10 dungeons. So like Outlaw Rogue's like, oh, I'm really OP when there's 5 targets for a while, or like 10 targets for a while, and that's Mythic Plus. So it's not like Outlaw Rogue is OP for one pull of one dungeon where they get to do something really cool. And there are specs that get to do really cool things one spot in one dungeon, like Trothak the Shark Puncher, for instance. Elemental Shaman does absurd damage to that boss because we can flame shock the training dummies, and then that gives us a bunch of lava surge procs, and we can do like 60,000 single target DPS to Trothak. Like that's really cool, but we can only do that on one boss out of the 40 bosses in BFA, whereas Outlaw Rogue on every single trash pull gets to turn on their Blade Flurry button, and so they're broken everywhere. And that's the problem, I think, is that it isn't that classes are OP in some spots, it's that one of the spots is just always for some of the specs.
And like Sephiroth ended up saying, Blizzard also tunes very, very slowly, so it also just becomes like a 6-month issue whenever it really should just be like a 5% nerf on one button kind of issue.
Yeah, I think that like more responsive class balance. Again, part of the problem is that like Blizzard doesn't want to balance like at the same time that people are like in Mythic seasons, right? Like when everybody's doing Mythic progression, they don't want to do class balance in the middle of that. And I think that it's reasonable to not like force people to do that. Like to when you nerf somebody's spec out from under them when they're doing Mythic progress, I think it's okay to try and avoid doing that. But I think that still, more responsive class tuning would be a good thing, for sure. All right. Any final questions from the chat that we've picked up here?
I did actually have one more. It was from Never Nude. It says, "What about Mythic Plus talents like PvP has?"
Yeah, that's another interesting solution. Although I think that the PvP talent system is weird and also bad. Like, I think it's weird that your class just like gets these different talents in some parts of the game. I think it's kind of an interesting and flavorful solution to the problem, maybe, but I don't think it would be good.
I think it would be good. I think it would be awesome, but I don't think they would ever do it because that would be a whole new system they'd have to introduce and design and then maintain on top of everything else they do. So I think the PvP talents do solve a lot of downfalls of many specs. It gives them the tools that they couldn't have otherwise, like disarm on Windwalker or Mistweaver. So
something like if you could like talent into a battle res if you were one of the specs that didn't have it, talented to the Shroud. Yeah. Okay, it's kind of interesting. I wonder what would be the other options though that you take over the like battle res if you already had one in your group, like that would be compelling but not like overpowered.
You could do that with items too, like the engineering battle res. You can make a Shroud item. That would solve the same thing, kind of. Kind of,
yeah. I don't know. At end of the day, like people like to look at battle res as why Resto Druid is overpowered and Shroud is why Rogue is overpowered, but those are not. That's not it. It's not that simple. Like the specs are broken numbers wise, not just with those couple points of flashy utility.
Yeah.
All right. That's gonna do it for our question time here this week and our show. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll be back next week. Not live for the next 6 weeks. We'll be back recorded in some way. It might still be live on the Twitch channel. Follow our Twitter at Titanforge WoW to both ask us questions for our next show which may happen earlier than Thursday, depending on when we pre-record. So follow that nice and close, and also to learn when our next show is going to be and how to watch it and how to listen to it.
In other news, you can probably check out Trell and myself on the main Warcraft channel next Saturday.
Yep, that'll be awesome. Looking forward to that one. When you would be watching the podcast, you can instead watch Tettles and Trell there. And maybe I'll do a watch party in Discord. We can hang out. So, yeah. All right. That's been episode 10. See you guys next week.